Hello and welcome yet again to another edition of Axiom Flux here at Season 3, Episode 17 on this May 28th, 2017. I'm James Kingsley, and we've got, as usual, our gang of inquisitive people looking at the world with inquisitive eyes. We've got Paul. Hi, Paul. How you doing? We got Stab. Stab, how are you doing today? Are you on with us still? I see he's got his little...
I think Stav's still dog walking.
There he is, definitely, because I'm hearing me. Now I've got Jeff. Jeff is with us.
Hi.
Jeff, are you there?
Hi, James. Are you all right, mate?
Oh, yes. No, I was hearing my show because I had it over on the other thing. I had duplicate sound for a minute. That happens. But it's good. I'm doing great overall. I kind of missed out on this weekend. I was supposed to see my son, and we weren't able to make that. But, hey, not that we weren't able to. They weren't able to. And so it got canceled. But we're going to see him soon. He's 8 years old now. And I want to see my kid. Anyway, we've got Jeff with us as well. And PJ, you there?
Yep, I'm here on the tech side of things. How we doing, James?
Oh, doing all right, brother. And of course, Jeff. And this is our team. Now we've also got a special guest with us today because our topic is sort of, we touched on this a couple of weeks back. You might remember we talked about the right to lie. And I think Kathleen is going to be on with us again one of these days. Kathleen Arthur, we're trying to figure out how to get her hooked up. But today we do have a very special guest, Pippa King of pippaking.blogspot.com. You can read her blog there, dealing with biometrics. Are your children being surveilled? Are people watching you? Because sometimes it feels like somebody's watching me. And I think it's a Michael Jackson song, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, no, that was well, Michael Jackson sang part of that song, but it's one of those songs. And we all kind of feel like that sometimes. How much of it's paranoia? How much of it's real? We're going to examine on today's show with Pippa King and the gang here at Axiom Flux. So first of all, let's just open up the board. Let you guys just chatter a little bit about, first of all, some things we know. There's been a lot going on lately, and I want to hit the stuff that we know we got to talk about because I want to get then down to the main topic of the show. But the first topics I want to talk about is, hey, we had some things happen, and what you think about? Well, let's just go right there. What do you think about this bombing? Happened, explosion. I mean, we're in England, guys. Manchester. What happened there? What's going on?
Well, I think it was probably a false flag event, if I was to put in my tuppence worth. That's not to say that there wasn't real casualties involved, but I think there's usually something more behind it. I've seen one article saying it was an MI6. His father was something to do with MI6 agent or something like that. So it's always the state in the background there pulling the strings somehow, I reckon. I don't know.
I think the point, I saw something.
James, I just confirmed that it's not a hoax. I know people personally who, was injured in that attack, so I can guarantee you now it's not an hoax.
Okay, can I say I agree? I agree. A false flag isn't always a hoax. A false flag can be a real event in which then it's in essence, oh look, a door, an opening to do something, to make something else happen, and so it gets absorbed into this whatever you want to call it plan.
It's definitely a part of the Hegelian dialectic, isn't it?
I was just about to say the same thing there, Paul. You had a Hegelian dialectic, which is problem, action, solution.
Absolutely, exactly. But we don't have to say they caused it. Not all these things are caused by these people. They're just used by these people. A crazy person can do something, and the next thing you know, another thing can come along.
I was going to say, I thought it was interesting how the general election campaigning was stopped for the day after Theresa May had a disastrous sort of announcement that she was going to have this dementia tax. So that was all suspended for at least 2 days with the main parties. And also as well, it's been interesting since that event that Jeremy Corbyn and also Boris Johnson and John Pilger, who's a great journalist, have all come out and said, it's because of our interventions in the Middle East that this has come about. And yet the Conservatives and Michael Fallon are saying, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not. So it's sort of taken the sort of talk in this country, certainly on the general election, to a sort of security level thing. But it's just awful what happened. And
I see it. What I always boil it down to, I mean, when I look at this kind of stuff, is, hey, they're just looking for anything to promote fear, because anything that promotes fear promotes us going, please save us, in which case then we bow down. So again, it's problem, reaction, solution. Their solution is...
It's interesting how they've targeted the next generation, because that sort of teenage, I mean, there were children as young as 8 there, and they've sort of generally been left out of this sort of fear-mongering thing, because it has been a general sort of focus. But when these things have happened, it's sort of been on the general population. This was specifically targeted at an event with youngsters there, which hopefully, or whatever the reason, will turn that sort of generation onto that sort of aspect of...
I seen an article a little while ago on Facebook. I don't know whether it's a genuine one or not, but it did say on there that the attacker, whose sister was interviewed, the sister turned around and said apparently that the attacker did it because he was knocked off with the US attacks on Syria when they did the 59 Tomahawk missiles or something. I don't know whether that's correct or not, but I mean,
it's really sad that we can't always tell what's correct anymore, because can we trust our news to give us what's correct? Or are we basically being given and fed? What level of bullshit are they giving us is the question.
We're spoon-fed it left, right and centre. But what really gets me is the fact that they said it was a big and sophisticated bomb, yet the light fittings and all the fittings around were still intact.
Right.
So they are actually using this. And what also makes me laugh is the fact that they're praising the police, they're praising the services, this, that, and the other. Well, they shouldn't be praising them, because it shouldn't have happened. If their services are that good, it should not have happened.
And also, Paul, you've probably got now,
especially as Al Bedi was reported to the services, the secret services. It should not have happened.
No, I agree with you. And also, what we've got as a norm now in the UK is weaponised police officers on the street and army on the streets, and that just sensitises us. And you know, on Twitter and social media, the police have been encouraging people to take selfies with policemen with, you know, guns, saying and smiling, and it's all normal. And I think that's
yeah. I also saw a tweet with an armed Lego policeman.
This is what I worry about, you know, them trying to normalise things and make it look like it's a normal part of everyday British life, which they shouldn't do, because by doing that, I mean, you know, future generations are going to come to look at this as a normal way of life, you know, if they're not told.
Well, I see a lot of things going on in society right now where there's this normalization happening to take things that used to be in my generation, like we believed in being completely and having a private life. You could have a private life, and that was a good thing. And you would go into your private life, and you wouldn't have to worry about being watched, surveilled in any way whatsoever. So I had my private life. But now I see kids who are like wandering around, and even people, by the way, who are activists and say, I am protecting myself, but they'll go on their Facebook and they will talk about the most intimate details of where they're at, what they're doing, etc. They are giving more information than anybody would ever have to even follow them around just by putting it on their Facebook. And yet they're the same people I see sometimes who are like, the government's watching me, man. They're coming, they're watching me. And it's like, you're making it very easy for them.
People are very trusting. They're too trusting by far, James. I mean, you know, the way since I've been on the internet, I've always used fake details on my profile, put a fake picture up.
Oh, I gave up on that years ago.
And you know, I think people should just be a bit sensible and realise that if everything they do online, you're in public. You are literally in public when you're online. I don't think they look at it as though you're in public, but you internet footprint with everything you do, and you put out an IP address every time you visit a website or anything else. So they should be aware of that, you know.
Well, think too, even a small thing, like when you have a small thing like a Twitter, look what our president here in the US tweets at 3 a.m. sitting on the toilet alone, and the whole world is affected in a moment by him liking or not liking something.
The Secret Service is already collating enough data on people just on what you click on, what you like, what you dislike, whether you show an angry face or what have you. They're already gaining a large profile on everybody that's on.
Oh yeah. They know more about you. If you want to know something that's really funny, if you're on Facebook, and I've tried this because I don't care anymore. Like, go ahead, watch me, government. Watch me when I get in your face. It's just what's going to happen. And I'm sitting there and I'm playing these games where they allows them to go to my Facebook analytics, which I know is totally intrusive, and they have all this data on me, big fucking deal. But they go in there, and it's amazing how close a lot of these data analytic things are to knowing things about me. So that when the stuff comes up on these little app sites like Meow or whatever, the stuff's really super close, if not maybe even thinking above what I'm thinking of me in some cases. Like, it actually knows me better than me.
What I've noticed since I was on Facebook is that everything, like all these algorithms they use and all this data collection, is a lot of it is for advertising purposes. I mean, you get you definitely get the adverts which you're in for stuff that you're interested in, but not just.
Well, let us not forget that I was a marketer. I was a marketer for years, so I know about how that all goes together, and I know that what they're looking for, the metadata that they're getting out of you, is very highly. They want to know how you think.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, when
you hand in glove, aren't they?
When you do all your likes and your emoticons and things like that, they gather that, and it acts like a mirror. So whatever it is that you like, that's the sort of things that show up in your news feed. It's like a reflection. It's like basically a reflection. Everything that gets posted is a reflection of what you like, you know. So it's like a mirror coming back at you, which to me is pointless, but you know.
It's interesting. I enjoy looking in the mirror sometimes to see. I mean, I learned a lot from mirrors.
Oh gosh, no.
but not as an egotist. I mean, when I was younger, but more like being self-critical, saying what can I make better in me. I mean, the mirror can be a very.
I meant oh gosh for myself, not for you, James.
Oh, okay.
The trouble is, it always has.
Sorry, my ego got in the way there, guys. Sorry.
The trouble is, I was going to say, with the mirror thing, you could always have the possibility of turning everybody into complete narcissists, but.
Oh, they already are, though. They all carry around a mirror of the world in their hands now, and they push its little buttons, and that mirror tells them all that they want to hear, see, and know. Right there.
Yeah, well, you know where we're going to stray from this? We're going to stray onto the subject of the Mandela effect before long.
No. Let's not go there.
On the wall. Who is the fairest of them all? And some people will say, it's not mirror on the wall, it's magic mirror on the wall.
Right. And the original Disney movie is Magic Mirror on the Wall. I know I've studied the Mandela. I think the Mandela thing is interesting, but what it is it's, to me, I've looked at it scientifically, I guess now, and I've come to the conclusion that it really has more to do with just our memory function and our inability to remember things correctly. And it's kind of humbling as a human race to have to deal with that. It's not special. It's humbling. We can be wrong.
Some of us have gone into a parallel universe. They reckon that they've got supercomputers now that work at a quantum level.
I have yet to see the evidences of that. So until I do scientifically, I'm going to stay with the memory dysfunction concept because I think that it just makes more sense.
Stay skeptical with everything and keep an open mind, but not so
absolutely.
But not so open.
And flip everything that comes over mainstream media 180 degrees because you're closer to the truth then.
Yeah, exactly, Paul.
And then we got our president. Let's flip here for a second. What do people think of what he just did? His first trip around the Israel and and all the countries over there. What do you guys think of what's the view? I mean, here in America, we're being sold.
What's the deal? It was arms, was it not?
Arms deal, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm asking is, because here in America, we're trapped. We don't see the real news from our perspective. They tell us politically what you're supposed to think. That's the new way. Now, there are people who are saying outside the box stuff, but you have to go outside your own country sometimes to really find out what's going on in your country. So that's why I guess I'm putting it out there. Is like, how did the world view President Trump's visit to all of these different locations, Israel, you know, all the, where else? Where else did he go? I remember he ended up in Israel.
I've seen one little video of Trump. I haven't been following him, to be honest, but I've seen one where he's pushing some official-looking bloke out of the way or something. I don't know what that's about.
And also, the ones where his wife is I love these. The ones where his wife is either like averting, holding his hand, or slapping his hand outright. It's so hysterical. I'm like,
I thought he was busy pushing globes.
yeah, they love little. You mean glowing orbs? You mean holding on to glowing?
Yeah.
I think weren't they all looking at the Death Star there? I thought that was the Death Star. I didn't, you know.
I've seen one video of Trump, and he's there brushing the hand of this the Pope or something like that, and the Pope slaps his hand as if to say, "Get your hand off me, you kinky devil."
The Pope didn't look. The Pope did not look too happy. The Pope.
Yeah,
I saw a picture of him with Obama, and he's all smiles, and then I see him in a picture with Trump. Oh my God, it's just crazy. Anyway, we want to get on with our guest here too. I just wanted to touch on some of those issues out there that we've been dealing with. I'm sure some of them will get brought up along the way here now too. But Pippa, I know you're here, you're our guest, and I don't want to put off what you have to say because I think you've got a lot to share, many years of sharing. So I want to get right to that, and I will just turn it over to you. Tell us, Pippa, what you feel is important that we should know. How should we deal with the situation of all of this government watching our kids, getting them used to being watched? What can we do? Save us, Pippa King. Save us.
I don't know if I'm capable of doing that. Well, can I just say thank you for having me on. It's really nice to be here and chatting with you. I've been at this sort of campaigning for privacy for children in schools since 2004. Back in 2004, my children were 6 and 7 years old, and they were nearly fingerprinted for a library card system in a small primary school. There's only 160 pupils in this primary school, so it wasn't like there were thousands of kids in there, and they needed to sort of automate a library system. And so what had happened was I'd bizarrely, and I'd been on the internet maybe a couple of weeks before I saw the fingerprint reader in school, and read this article about how they were using fingerprint systems in schools to so kids could wander freely in and out of the library, pick a book up, scan it, fingerprint themselves, and then they could book themselves books in and out of the library. And I just thought to myself when I read the article, this is never going to catch on. It's absolute overkill. And there, you know, a couple of weeks later, I walked into my school, primary school library, and there's this fingerprint reader, exactly the same as the one I saw in the article. So I sort of broached the head teacher and said to her, when are you going to ask my permission to take my children's fingerprints, because I'm not going to give it? And she just looked me squarely in the face and just said, I don't need your permission to do that. And I just thought, well, that's outrageous, because any parent, whether in the US or the UK or really anywhere in sort of the Western world, I don't know about sort of the third world, but if schools want to process any sort of data or do sort of medical procedures like plasters or whatever for your children, they need to have your permission for it. And I just thought, why do they not need my permission to take my child's fingerprint and put it on a database? And it's, as it turns out, our Data Protection Act in the UK, which was legislated in 1998, is woefully out of date. And of course, biometric technology wasn't at all part of this sort of picture then. And so through a loophole in that particular bit of legislation, the schools could take children's fingerprints, iris scans, infrared palm scans, facial recognition, which is what they did in the UK from 2001 onwards, and process that data, put it on a database, and not even tell parents about it. So not only did they not need the parents' consent, but they could just take that data from children and put it on a database. Now, my problem with that was, at that particular point in time, biometrics wasn't being used in adult society, so we had no experience of how it was going to be used or how it was going to be processed and what consequences that, you know, good or bad, could be. So we couldn't advise our children whether or not to do that. But also as well, I think it sent a really subtle psychological message to children that in order for you to have access to knowledge in the form of, you know, library books, or now it's commonly used for canteen systems, in order for us to feed you, you are going to have to give us your biometrics to get that essential, mundane, day-to-day stuff that you need to operate your life with. And that wasn't a lesson or a message that I wanted my kids to have. And I think primarily what I wanted my kids to have in adult life was anonymity. If they wanted to protest and bring the Berlin Wall down or end apartheid in South Africa, whatever they wanted to do, that they should be able to do it freely without consequence. And I think biometrics, that sort of bodily tracking technology, which biometrics is. So bio means life and metric means measure. So you've got computer systems measuring you and identifying who you are. Then that to me was a sort of technology that didn't need to be introduced in schools with young children as young as, well, my two were 6 and 7 at the time, but they were using it on children as young as 3 or 4 years old. And it just, every sort of gene in my body just screamed, this is wrong, it doesn't need to happen in schools, there's no debate about it, there was no transparency. And that sort of spurred myself on to get in touch with the person who had originally written the article that I had read on the internet. She was a woman called Terry Doughty, and she ran a little group called Action on Rights for Children. And when I got in touch with her shortly after I'd seen the fingerprint reader in school and said, look, what can we do? Because this is outrageous. You know, schools shouldn't be fingerprinting kids just to get a library book out. And there was a number of, maybe a handful, less than 5 or 6 parents that had been in touch with her around the UK to sort of say the same thing. She said to me, do you fancy coordinating the parents, you know, via me and No to ID and Privacy International, and having a go at trying to change the legislation and the Data Protection Act? And I was, yeah, I'm up for that. You know, didn't know anything about biometric technology. I'm not a scientist, so I don't have any sort of background in that. I'm a music teacher by trade, so, but it was inherently wrong, and something needs to be done, because the vast majority of parents in the school playground in the primary school that my kids were in were not really very happy with it. But I think it's interesting when you go back to education as a parent, when teachers sort of say something or do something, or the school implements a system, you sort of just sort of go along with it, because that's what you're programmed to do. From the age of 4 to 16 or 18, I was in the education system and I was told what to do, and I just did it and I went along with it. And parents generally sort of do the same thing, even though they're not very happy with some of the decisions schools make. Very rarely do parents put their head above the parapet, because you sort of get marked out as a problem parent, and hopefully that's not got a consequence on your kids. But you know, also as well, for me, the children, especially at that age, the age my children were at, they're in a compliant situation, and if a teacher says to them, go and put your fingerprint on this fingerprint reader, they'll just do it. They don't have any, and they shouldn't have any need to question that, because they're only 6 and 7 years old, and that's up to me to make that decision, not the school. So
they're looking at it in the way that kids are going to be more compliant than adults, I suppose, as a general rule. So they'll get them while they're young and get them firmly in their control. So by the time they reach adulthood, they accept that as the norm. I suppose that's probably what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and what control system that was, when they're actually telling the children that not to listen to the parents, they've got to listen to the teachers. The children are actually being told this.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and this is why No to ID at the time, that was very, I mean, they were a big campaign group from 2000 to 2012. The UK government was, the Labour government was planning on introducing a biometric national card scheme, ID scheme, and No to ID were well against that.
And that was about 2008, was it not, Pippa?
We were involved with them from 2004 onwards, so I don't know when the Labour government decided to introduce the concept of national biometric ID cards, but certainly No to ID were really helpful in sort of supporting myself and the other parents, because they sort of saw this as a way of softening up the next generation. So if they were successful, No to ID, in getting a U-turn on the government to not introduce biometric national ID cards. But you know, their argument was, well, if you're going to introduce fingerprinting in schools for children, on an everyday sort of basis, all you've got to do is wait 15, 20 years and introduce it again. And the next generation are going to say, yeah, that's fine. We'll just give you fingerprints up and facial recognition. And because they've grown up with that as a norm, just for sort of mundane day-to-day sort of activities like eating and reading a book and access to areas and registration. So they were really, really supportive. And so there was myself and say about 4 or 5 other parents, and we actually went to Parliament and we lobbied MPs to try and get a change to the Data Protection Act, or at least a change, some sort of legislation, so that if schools were going to use this technology, they had to inform parents and gain some sort of consent. I mean, in my mind, this technology is not appropriate for use with children in schools at all. I'm not a Luddite, I don't mind biometric technology, but in this sort of circumstance, it's not appropriate in my opinion. And I think, you know, in other people's opinion, it might be okay, which is fine, but at least give people a choice. You know, it's not okay by me, it might be okay by somebody, another parent.
The way I look at it, Pippa, is they're not even at the age of consent. So if they're not at the age of consent, they can't make an informed decision whether they want that or not. So it's abusing their power over a less advanced mind, if you like. Poor young children being taken advantage of in that way is exploitative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not just that it's exploitive and abusive, it's also a danger with the technology. Pippa, could you actually explain the difference between passive and active?
Oh, you're talking about radio frequency identification.
Yes, yes.
So this is different to biometric. So biometric is measuring your body, like a fingerprint or an iris scan. So if you're talking about radio frequency identification or RFID, so an active technology would be where you carry a device on you that is sending out a radio signal. So you're basically the antenna, and different readers are picking up or triangulating where you are. If you carry a passive technology, which is what we all carry in our bank cards, which is 13.56 hertz, I think, which is called near field communication, NFC.
I just got my new one.
Yeah, you've got your little sort of 3 little.
It came out a little chip in it, and they were so proud. In fact, I have it here. I'll have to look it up and read what they told me about it. It's so exciting.
So the NFC 13.56 megahertz technology is in bank cards. We have a Oyster card system in London, which enables you to travel around all the public transport. Anything that's got like a swipe card or a contactless facility is working on this 13.56 megahertz. Then that's a passive chip, so it's basically asleep. But if you take it up to a reader, I think it's about a meter where it can read it from. But I mean, if you've got a passive bank card, you can take it up to read and just swipe it. That's called passive RFID. So basically, the reader is the antenna, and it's waking up your passive chip. But RFID is also used in schools in the United States, where pupils are wearing active RFID tags. So they're wearing a lanyard that has a chip in that's pulsating, has a battery, and it pulsates radio frequency. That has happened one instance in the UK, at a school in Cheshire. To cut a very long story short, they introduced it's called an ultra-wideband active frequency radio chip in the lanyards around I think about 5,000 children's necks. This is a 14 to 19 college with lots of sort of part-time courses, and they had money from the government to build a new college. And within the college, what they did is they used basically military-grade ultra-wideband. So ultra-wideband RFID. Normally, if you're talking about radio frequency identification, you're talking about one frequency like 13.56 megahertz, or another specific frequency. In this particular college, they had a splash of frequencies that went from 6.35 gigahertz to 6.75 gigahertz. And what a splash of frequencies does is it gives you a 3D location. So if you have one frequency that's going out on one, like a musical note, as it were, like a one note, you only get a 2D of where somebody is. But if you've got just built a college that was, say, 3 stories high, and you wanted to know which story a pupil was on, then you could, if you use the splash frequency, it gives you a depth. They use also ultra wideband radio frequencies for ground penetration, and also in the military they use it to sort of look in buildings for see if anybody's alive or what's in the building. So you get a 3D picture. So these children in West Cheshire were carrying around these RFID chips, and they hadn't told parents what was on the lanyard. They hadn't told the children what was in the lanyard, and it was only I think it was in 2012 when the RFID Journal, which is an international journal of radio frequency identification devices, published an article on it, that I picked up on it, and I started to send the college some freedom of information requests about the sort of consent they'd gained from parents. And the college hadn't even informed the kids or the parents that they were wearing these devices. And the only reason I sort of picked up on that was because I'm sort of backpedaling now. Going back to the biometrics, we as a group of parents lobbied Parliament up to 2010. Then we had a general election in the UK, and the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, who were then in the opposition to the Labour then government, said, you know, if we get into power, we'll do something about the biometrics. And they did. They introduced the Protection of Freedoms Bill, which turned into the Protection of Freedoms Act in 2012. And that got signed off, went for royal assent and got signed off in May 2012. And it was that summer of May of 2012 that I thought, oh, we've done it. You know, we've got legislation for consent for biometrics in schools. That's great. And it was that particular summer. And I don't know if you remember, James, there was a particular incident in the States where a pupil called Andrea Hernandez had refused an RFID chip, an active chip in, I think it was San Antonio. And there was a big hoo-ha about the school sort of expelling her because she wouldn't take the RFID chip. And it was over that summer that I sort of caught this story coming in.
What year was that? What year were we on?
That was 2012. I think.
Okay, yeah, I was pretty active back then. I probably reported on it at the time because I was working on all sorts of different political viewpoints. I was with Freedom Informant Network at the time, so I was probably dealing with a lot of people discussing it, but it was like one of those things that went, it's like so much of our news today. There's so many things going on. It's hard to remember all of that, you know?
I'll tell you what they have done, though. I mean, I know they threw out the idea of having biometric ID cards and all that, Pippa, but they sort of snuck it in through the EU through the back door with driving licenses, because now you get a photograph on your driving license and they can use that for facial recognition and things. So that's a type of biometrics, I suppose, like you would call it. I don't know.
It is absolutely a type of biometric, yeah, absolutely. And if you go and have a photograph taken for a passport or a driving license, that you generally have to go somewhere and it has to be taken for you, because there's a certain, I mean, certainly with the technology as it was maybe about 5 years ago, facial recognition really worked off a full frontal photograph. Now they can do facial recognition on angles of faces and all sorts of the technology and fingerprint and.
Well, they were working on this technology years ago anyway, because I remember I was back in the 80s. I worked in the casino industry, and I was a marketer in the late 80s, early 90s. They were really getting this technology down at that point, and so they could know customers. And the technology basically was that when a person walked in, they wanted to know who that person was, what kind of, how much spending they spent. And believe me, they would know. There was places where they could just click right in, look at a face, if it would figure out who that customer was and tell everything about it.
Wow.
How much money that customer spent, everything. But it was a marketing tool. Again, marketing was always on the edge of all of this. Marketing wants to know more than anything else where you're at, what you're buying, what you're thinking, because marketing is about finding out who you are and then selling you things you want.
As I said earlier, James, marketing and psychology more or less go hand in glove.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about data and data collection and profiling. And this is my concern about the use of biometrics in schools is not just, you know, about the fact that the harvesting fingerprint data and, you know, voice recognition in some instances, facial recognition sort of goes without saying anyway, because we're all CCTV. But when you're collecting a whole load of data against somebody like, you know, what we have in schools nowadays is what they call VLPs, which is virtual learning platforms. So quite a lot of the work that children will do in schools is on electronic sort of programs. And these programs can determine if a child pauses a little bit longer on maybe long multiplication or a little bit of geography or physics. So they can, the program or the educational technical supplier can then sort of manipulate, well, then this child should have this homework. But then that's only good if you know that the child sat at the computer is the person doing the homework. It could be your big sister or your best friend or your mum and dad. So where I can see biometrics in education going is whereby children are logging onto a computer with a fingerprint. And certainly this happened on the West Coast of the United States. There was a certain school district, I think in San Diego, that got offered, 3,000 free iPads. But what it's going to do is every 60 seconds, it's going to facially scan the child to make sure it is that child sat doing the homework. Because data is only good when you're collecting mass data on children if you absolutely know it's that child sat in front of the computer doing it. And then, of course, you've got sort of the long-term sort of implications of collecting data like that. Say, for example, the UK Department for Education shares all the data that all the English and UK schools gives them with Department of Work and Pensions, the tax office. And so what they do is they have these what they call longitudinal studies, where they put all the information in literally from when a child steps into nursery at 2 years old, and they have learning goals at 2 years old. Unbelievable. And up to the point where they're 19 when they leave state education, then they go into further education and then into the workplace. So they can sort of determine how a child's educational progress affects their future tax, or the country's future tax income, basically. But also as well, these databases don't just log how the child is doing educationally. It logs their height, their weight, their attendance, their reasons for not attending, any special needs they've got.
And how low they're bowing before the Queen.
Yeah. And so there's a huge potential for data mining, and we've got private corporations like BA Systems are running some academies in Cumbria. We've got AMEY, a big multinational company, a construction company that's running all the schools in Glasgow for 35 years. I think their contract started about 10 years ago. They're not in education because they're philanthropic and they want to do it for the good of the nation. They're doing it for the data. They're doing it because they can harvest 35 years worth of children's
especially when they're harvesting things like the ethnic origin and the political opinions, religious beliefs, etc., etc., etc. That is nothing to do with the child to learning, is it?
No, I mean, it's interesting because I did this in sort of 15 years ago, and my children are in primary school, and we made the decision that we would home educate it from 11 onwards, which is when they left primary school. So we took them out of education and home educated them for 6 years, and they went back into further education a couple of years ago, just over a couple of years ago. And my youngest has just gone through the Prevent strategy, and they had this sort of so Prevent is a national UK strategy to stop young people from being radicalised. And they had this sort of hours topic on Prevent, and they got given a sheet of blank paper, and they said, "Will you please write down what would make you radical?" So my son, I didn't fill it in at all. So there's no way I'm telling you what made me radical.
A McDonald's cheeseburger, that's radical, man.
I know. So it's
all right. Any child who likes McDonald's cheeseburgers is now a threat to our society.
A complete and utter extremist.
We need to redefine their brains now.
Well, yeah, this is it, though, isn't it? I mean, and the kids are quite savvy to this, because I had one parent get in touch with me, and he said, "Oh, my children have just been told that they're going to monitor all their, school email systems for, words like, I don't know, bomb, whatever it is." And the kids just thought, "Oh, we'll just go on Yahoo or whatever it was, but just school system." So the Prevent strategy you know, the people that will get round it are not me and you and the parents. It'll be the kids, and they can.
Hi, kids. Welcome to Film Everything at Your House Day. Be sure to get out a camera and take it around your house, shooting every creepy corner. Go into your mom and dad's room, yeah, that drawer too, and film their stuff. Now, send it to us here at US and the UK governments, because we love you.
Yeah, I was going to say, Pippa, that I seen an article going back a while ago that they've actually in some schools they put CCTVs in the toilets, in the kids' toilets in schools.
That's to make sure that they were true when they held up that one finger or those two fingers. If they really did what they did, because honesty is important, and if you're going to one or two it, you better have the proper number up there.
Yeah. I mean, it's over the top, isn't it? That sort of surveillance.
That's downright disgusting.
I mean, what are they doing it for? Is it to try and prevent them? They're looking after your kids' security to prevent them being attacked by marauding toilet paper or something.
Just wait until the first bomb goes off in a bathroom.
Yeah, I know.
Then it's gonna be all. Then we'll be like, oh, please put cameras in the toilets. Those ass bombs are killing everyone.
No, this goes back years. I mean, I had a friend of mine who, when he was a young man, he told me he got a job in this factory, and in the toilets, they put up the employers
jobs in the toilets.
Yeah, the employers would put up a CCTV in the toilets, and my mate, he went in and had a go at the boss, and he said, "What the hell is this about? I don't like being filmed while I'm, doing a number two or whatever." And he had a go at his boss about it, and his boss said it's just company policy now. And my mate said, "Well, you can stick this job," and he walked out of his job. So
I would think that's really invasive. That's very, when they want to get into your toilet habits.
Yeah,
well, they do have CCTV, and they have had CCTV in school toilets in the UK for at least 10 years.
What?
Oh yeah.
Is it in all schools, Pippa?
I think it is up to the particular headmaster or CEO or principal of the school. Same with biometrics. Some schools will have biometrics in because they think it's a great system and it stops bullying and it's cashless. And some headmasters in schools, their teachers will say, we're not having it, it's too invasive. And I think the same thing goes with CCTV. I think, as far as I understand, most schools have CCTV. It's very unusual to have a school that doesn't have any CCTV cameras in. To what extent whether they're in the classrooms, whether they're live. I mean, in some schools, the head teachers can have live streams of classrooms, and whether it's to monitor children's behaviour or whether it's to monitor teachers. I mean, there's a sort of issue there with teachers, and unions sort of say,
it's for the safety of the students.
Yeah, but what worries me is who is actually doing the monitoring? Who's sitting on that chair watching those TVs? I mean, with all this paedophilia that's going on, who is actually doing the monitoring?
The International Pedophilia Society will be undertaking that.
Exactly, they could be filming it all and selling it off to child porn companies or something for It's disgusting. I mean, it's absolutely invasive. It's over
anything for a buck, buddy. Anything for a buck.
Well, there was a system that was reported, I think, about two or 3 years ago. There was a company called WatchBot, WATHBOT, that sort of they went on 2 local BBC radio stations in the UK saying, okay, we've got a CCTV system in schools where parents can hook into the CCTV system and see their kids in schools. And I was like, no, you can't do that. I mean, for any sort of criminal checks on people that are sort of observing kids, you can't have, maybe you've got a school of 1,000 kids, you can't have 2,000 parents hooking into a CCTV system in real time.
Looking at anybody's children.
I know.
We could put wagers on how many noses get picked a day.
Yeah.
I mean,
it'll be great.
All this surveillance stuff can be used against you, even down to these what you were saying about these card readers with the fingerprint readers. I mean, that'd encourage people to get their fingers chopped off, wouldn't it? I mean, I watched a program the other day with some bloke. He had some safe. I don't know what, I think it is off of the blacklist or something like that. But he had a safe and he had a retinal scan on it. And this bloke ended up losing an eye so that somebody could break into his safe. Do you know what I mean? So it can all be used against you, all this stuff. It's all potentially dangerous.
Well, in actual fact, a biometric password is the least secure password you could have, because you leave your fingerprints around wherever you go. You have your face on whatever CCTV or IP Internet Protocol systems there are. It's a physics, and you can't change that. Once that sort of security of yours is gone, it's gone. And there was a really interesting article by gosh, I haven't got it here, but it's on my Twitter feed, about passwords that somebody, I think in Japan, had written about, saying, you know, the best password is a password that is memorable. And in actual fact, it's not really a memorable password that involves letters or numbers, because we've only been using those really for the past maybe 1,000 years as a human race. The most memorable password you can have is that of an image. So because nobody can hack your brain at the moment, but they can take your fingerprint. And I think it was Samsung. There was an article, I think, on CNET that said that Samsung have introduced a new pay system, so you can access your bank account by facial recognition, and that can be hacked by a photograph. So biometrics is really what was thought of as a very secure form of identification. Is now, as the technology is maturing, is becoming and more hackable, is becoming a less secure form of identification than actually something that you hold in your brain and your memory, like a PIN number or a number string, or a memory of a photograph or something like that.
I know PIN numbers are really secure because I always forget mine. So.
Well, do you know, that's really interesting, because schools will say, oh, biometrics are great because you can't forget your finger when you go to school, and people forget PIN numbers. As a parent, I have never had a conversation with another parent where, oh, my kid's got its password or its PIN number. Kids remember PIN numbers. And schools will say as well, oh, kids forget PIN numbers and passwords. Excuse me, if you're teaching them to pass exams that they studied 2 years for, and they can't remember a 4-digit PIN, that doesn't wash. It doesn't wash.
Do I need to know that for college? Because unless I need to know that for college, I want to play Angry Birds.
Yeah.
I suppose the next stage, Pippa, would be to get them all RFID chipped under their skin or something, so that they can just, have that scanned or something, the mark of the beast. That's probably where we're going, isn't it? Ultimately.
Well, if I'd have had this conversation with somebody 10 years ago, I'd have been branded a loon, but it's happening now, and companies are offering this, and there's a company called Dangerous Minds in the west coast of the States that are offering the 13.56 megahertz, which is near field communication. So that's the sort of standard frequency that would work with bank cards, travel cards, everything. And people are getting it done voluntarily, which is okay. Do you know what? If they want to do it voluntarily, fine. But my big issue is don't impose it on the rest of society, because I will walk. I'm not participating.
It boils down to consent, doesn't it? And when a child's not at the age of consent, they can't make a really good informed decision on whether they want to have that placed under their skin or whatever, one of these RFID chips, which is, to me, I mean, they shouldn't do anything like that until they at least reached a sort of sensible age where they can make that decision.
Well, it's interesting because as parents, we are data controllers over our children. So in the Data Protection Act, you have data subjects and data controllers. So the subject is somebody who gives their data to somebody, and the data controller is the person that controls that data. So up to the age of 16, all parents in the UK are data controllers for their children. So if the school wants to process any information on a child, including biometrics now, the parent has to give written consent. However, when you're talking about RFID chips, but when it comes to medical consent, there was an instance actually in the city I'm in Hull, where a 12-year-old girl who was at a special needs school had been given the implant for birth control. So she'd been injected with a 3-month implant release estrogen. So what happened, I think in the mid-80s, we had a case in the UK whereby a 14-year-old girl had gone to the doctors and said, I want to go on the pill. And the doctor had said, yes, I'll put you on the pill. She was sexually active. And the mother got wind of this and tried to sue the doctor for doing it. And so it went to judicial review. And what was the ruling of that was something called Gillick competence. So it was Victoria Gillick was the mother that took the doctor to court. So Gillick competence sort of rules that any child, for medical purposes only, this isn't particularly for anything else, but for medical purposes, if a child is deemed by two professionals, whether it be healthcare or education or whatever, can make an informed decision. The child under 16 can make that decision medically without the parents knowing about it or the parents' consent. That doesn't apply to biometrics, but certainly it applies to medical implants like birth control chips, I suppose. Yeah.
I want to remind everybody for a moment because we're approximately at somewhere near the halfway point. So I wanted to kind of, while there's a moment here, point out you're listening to Axiom Flux, Season 3, Episode 17 here on this May 28th. Our guest today, Pippa King, the discussion on biometrics and things about our kids. I want to point out to some people there is a difference. I think some people get sort of biometrics mixed up with the whole idea of the chip, you know. And it is, like you were saying earlier, it is two different things. Biometrics is actually metering certain conditions of like your body, such as your iris, your fingerprints, your palm print. It might be a retina scan. I guess that's your eyes. Face recognition programs, things of that type. And a lot of places now are turning to this type of thing. They're almost mandating it. I know here in Oregon, when I went and got my new driver's license, one of the things I did notice is that they are now using biometric identifiers on our ID. And it's kind of just becoming this thing where they kind of do it without even telling you they're doing it. Or when they do, they sort of like enjoy telling you, oh, the latest biometric data. You notice how they sell you on it like it's something good. You know, we've got more about you now. Aren't you excited? And I think that's what we're dealing with here is like, who owns our kids? Who owns us? Who watches us? And why are they watching us? Pippa, what is the whole game plan, do you think, for all of this? What do you think is what's the future of where we're going, and how can we either avoid this or what? I mean, are we just got to just kind of give in? Hey, it's just the way it is.
Well, do you know, that's really interesting, because last year I read 1984 by George Orwell for the first time in about 20 years. And I also read Brave New World. And they sort of resonated with me. I had read them sort of a few decades ago, but they resonated with me particularly, rereading them again and thinking, actually, this is, we're sort of going down this sort of, I suppose, sleepwalking into a surveillance state. We're sort of going down this road into being the drip, 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 drip. I think because technology, I think if this technology had been brought in en masse within a year, we'd have all gone, no, that's outrageous, we can't do that, da da da. But because it's just a very slow sort of sort of drip feed for us, we accept it, and it makes our lives more easily accessible, sort of, with smartphones and things like that. So it's not like it's a hassle for us. It actually makes life more easy for us if we do maybe give over more of our data and we're on the smartphone or social media more of our time. And I think that's where is it going? I think it's going in a dangerous place. I'm sort of going back to what I said about I wanted my kids to have the freedom to protest. For example, in Edinburgh, which is in Scotland, we have their local council is looking at putting facial recognition CCTV behind their CCTV system. And they actually sort of said, we're doing this with a view to the point that our Scottish Parliament is in Edinburgh, and we want to see, if anybody's coming up to protest, we want to see who they are. So they made no bones about it. And this was January last year in an article in one of the local newspapers up there. So they're sort of saying that, we are going to introduce facial recognition TV because we want to know.
Again, they brag about it. It becomes a braggadocio thing.
Yeah.
It's like, look at this. We're using the latest technology.
Yeah. I think sort of to make us, in these times, I suppose, to make us feel safe. But it's not actually. It's making society a less safe place because we're not able to, if this sort of all sort of comes in, protest against any sort of dictatorship, I think.
Yeah.
I worry about a lot of these technologies. I'll be honest, Pippa. I mean, what you were saying about these contraceptive implants and things, it makes you wonder whether they're going to make them infertile for years and years and years or permanently, you know. And for example, I'll give you an example of another technology I really don't like, is at airports where you have to go through these scanners and things. Now, if you're exposed to X-rays are extremely harmful, you know, especially for fertility in blokes. If they don't cover their block and tackle up, so to speak, with lead. So, you know, things like this is all very dangerous technology. I don't trust a lot of it. I really don't.
Actually, Jeff, it was just the other day I read that they're doing away with the scanners in the British airports.
Are they? Finally, blimey, that's good. That's
well, can I just tell you about something else then, which is going to blow your mind, because there's a company called Radio Physics Solutions that was born out of Manchester Metropolitan University. They got some grants from a scientific research council via the government to introduce another ultra wideband frequency technology. So basically, what Manchester Metropolitan University have done is developed a TSA style scanner that can be projected on crowds of people. So rather than you walking through a scanner and it looking at your body to see if you're carrying a device, it can be projected at groups of people sort of up to 30-40 meters away to see if they're carrying something like a gun or a suicide vest.
Is that the one that measures your walking gait as well?
No, this is different. This is almost like TSA style scanners, and they were trialing them in London with the Met Police. And I sent a freedom of information request. If you go to there's a website called whatdotheyknow.com where anybody can send a freedom of information request from there. And I've got an account. You can see that I sent the Met Police a freedom of information request on their use of this particular system. It's called Myrtle, MIRTLE. And I sort of asked them, you know, because the Manchester Metropolitan University was sort of saying, oh, we've done this, and it's absolutely great. And then suddenly they advertised it, and then when you ask the questions about it, they're like, oh no, we can't tell you about that. So I asked the Met Police in this freedom of information request when they were going to trial it, how they trialed it, and what. Because it's radio frequency. This is way above sort of Wi-Fi. In fact, I think it was covering 75 to 110 gigahertz, 95 gigahertz. DARPA, the Defence Advanced Research Project.
I don't think people realise what damages it does to your blood. It cleans blood out.
Yeah, and it's not just us though. It's the other wildlife and the bees and the birds and their sort of navigational systems. We have no idea what this sort of radio frequency effect has, not just on us but on the sort of environment as well. And so the Met Police came back, I think it was January this year, and said, we're not going to answer your freedom of information request because it's on the basis of national security. Now, the same company that owns this, the company that owns the Myrtle technology is a company called Radio Physics Solutions. They're owned by a company called Anglo Scientific. Anglo Scientific also own another company called Sequester. Now, Sequester approached the Met Police and the Home Office and said, look, we can make all CCTV systems speak to each other, put them into the same format and look at stuff and do facial recognition or facial detection. And we can, you've basically got fully integrated CCTV network, because I think about 6 to 8% of CCTV is public space television. So you've got, the police and councils run CCTV is only less than 10% of the CCTV in the UK. So Sequester had gone to the Home Office and said, look, we can hook up basically all the private systems. We can make it in the same format, and we can run, not at the moment, but we will be able to do a real-time monitoring system on all the CCTV systems. Now, Anglo Scientific that own Sequester, who want to do the real-time, 100% CCTV, they also own Radio Physics Solutions, who run the TSA style technology, ultra-wideband RFID. Want to hook up together so that the TSA style technology can talk to the real-time 100% CCTV monitoring and say, look, of course, this is all artificial intelligence. This is not human driven at all. So the artificial intelligence would think, okay, so there could be somebody that's wearing a gun there. Let's hook up to this local camera and we'll monitor this person across town. And this is what's I guess going on in London at the moment. I don't know, because I did send freedom of information requests to the Met Police about Sequester and Radio Physics Solutions, and they both denied me any information coming under national security. So that, and I don't know anywhere else in the world globally that's running a sort of TSA style scanning system, along with a company that purports to hook up all CCTV into a real-time monitoring system. And it's almost like Persons of Interest. So I don't know if you've ever seen that on Netflix, but it is very much so. The surveillance grid is coming down on us, and the police and security services are hiding behind national security and not letting us know about it. And this lack of transparency that I'm at all happy with the monitoring. Don't get me wrong, I really, really don't like the monitoring. But this, if you're gonna do it, be honest, because then I can make a decision not to go to London or not. Do you know what I mean?
But they're cooking us.
Yeah.
It's all way over the top, I mean, I think you've got to get to the point where you actually ask the question, well, if you weigh up the benefits of this against the loss of freedom,
How far is too far? How far is too far?
The benefits are only to a certain group. They're not for the benefits of the masses.
Well, I agree.
I mean, if they're saying all this stuff is good for the masses, for the majority of the people, it's a bit like the Manchester bombings. How was that allowed when there was no security as such there?
Well, I think over the years, I mean, I've seen changes in society to the point that, everything's so heavily policed now. I mean, you can't even walk along with a can of beer having a drink. I mean, where you get poured over by the police and told, yeah, throw that in the bin. You can't have that.
Can't have a cigarette in a public park.
Yeah, you can't have a can of beer in a public place. I mean, if you're not drunk and disorderly, you're not causing any problems. What's the big deal? I mean, everything's gone way over the top now, and I think they need to reel their necks back in, and we've got to basically stand up for our freedoms. Yeah, our freedom would be there today and it'd be gone tomorrow. The way
we're
things
frogs in the boiling water, though, my friend. We have been so trained to think. I mean, look at what most people. I was really surprised. I worked at a cashier at one point, and somebody said, I would say we're going through a line, and they said, I wish there was just some way to pay for this where I didn't have to I said, oh yeah, but maybe someday they'll just have this thing where you put your thumb on it. I was joking, and it was like, and the person goes, I hope they do. And I was shocked that somebody wanted that. And so that they're doing is they're selling us that by being surveilled, eventually you can just walk into a store and walk out with stuff and it'll just be taken out of your account. That all of this stuff can just happen around you. There'll be magic because you've just given over everything you are to them. So it's sold to the public as a benefit.
Well, most things sold as a benefit, aren't they? When they're definitely the opposite. Pippa, could you tell me the difference between biometrics and soft biometrics?
So biometrics is an actual measure of your body, like a fingerprint or an iris scan or facial recognition, whereas soft biometrics is where they look at, on a CCTV system, for example, in Glasgow, we've got a smart city. Our first smart city in the UK is Glasgow. And they haven't yet turned on their sort of soft biometric tracking system. But when they do, behind their CCTV, they can track you via the clothes that you're wearing or the way that you're walking, so they can sort of.
Facebook has that, right? Facebook has the biometrics down to where now they can look and see if you're in a picture. If you've got enough input into your site that your picture's there, it gets to know you. Facebook already has your biometrics. Yes, even yours, Jeff. You know, who looks like Nixon on a bad day. But anyway, oh wait, no, it's a predator. I'm sorry. But anyway, but the point is that I just realized one day that I was being watched so much. I guess for me, it was sort of weird. I had this moment of, I'm going to self-dox as highly, and I'm going to be as transparent as I can, comfortably. And just screw them. You know, go ahead, watch me. I'm an exhibitionist anyway. I have a radio show, all this, you know, go ahead, just watch everything I do. And you know, there was a certain freeing to that for me. It's probably not for everybody, but you know, to some degree, I had to kind of just realize that there was no hiding.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have considered for the past 10 or 15 years that everything I do electronically is monitored, and I don't mind that. I mean, I do mind it, but I've got nothing to hide, particularly.
Right. But I don't like it being done to others, and I do believe that people should have the right to privacy, and that's why I continue to fight it, because I will still self-dox. I don't care. You can know everything you want to know about me.
I think the dangers with I've got nothing to hide is that they can collate this information, they can use information from way back and then twist it. So if a solicitor says, a prosecuting solicitor says something in court and twists it, which invariably they do, you've got no right, because you're in front of just a judge now. They've done away with juries. You've got no 12 different people thinking and input into a jury. It's just a one person, and that one person will take a solicitor's word over your word.
Yeah, and I think where I'm coming from with this is, you know, I'm an adult. I can make these decisions. I can go online and do what I want to do, and make those decisions. Mm-hmm. But children don't know that, and a lot of parents, a lot of adults aren't savvy enough to advise their kids not to do X, Y, and Z online, or not to do X, Y, and Z on social.
First of all, we have to ask, at what point, I mean, here's a big question. At what point do we hold kids accountable for what they do online? Because I can tell you from personal experience that a child of 14, 15 years old, if they get online, they can do some things that can get them into criminal situations, and they don't even realize that it could be something as simple as some girl sending him a naked picture and he shows it to a friend.
Yeah, don't you think they ought to bring in a law, actually, although I'm against bringing in laws all the time, but as soon as a child reaches 16 or 17 or 18 or thereabouts, all their previous information should be destroyed.
Well, do you know what? This is what's so frightening in schools. I mean, there's a video I could send you a link to, or I maybe should send you a link.
They no longer destroy any information, I guess. It's going to be
where educational tech companies collect so much data about children that it's more than Google collects on us. They can log every keystroke, and in some cases every eye movement across the screen. They can profile children to such an extent, more than we as an adult population are being profiled. And children and parents have no idea this is happening in schools. And it's not the schools, or particularly the government, that's doing it. These are big multinational.
It's non-invasive. It's non-invasive. You don't know they're doing it. You can take a picture of somebody without anybody knowing you ever took the picture. Do a biometric scan on it, and boom, you got it.
I mean, with all this, at least when I was behind the Iron Curtain back in early 1970s, 74 actually, at least we could see the KGB following us. Now, with all this kind of surveillance, you can't see it, and you forget it's there. Even if you do know about it, you tend to forget it's there. But if you've got the KGB actually following you, you don't forget they're there.
Well, I don't think people really realise how invasive all this stuff really is, and to what level it goes. Because if you look at, for example, smart televisions, if you've got a smart television, you think you're watching TV, but your TV is watching you. Anybody can hack into that TV. Literally, anybody can hack into that TV and activate the the camera inside.
So now every day I sit in front of my TV doing a show. See, that's what I do now. I sit there in front of it and I go, all right, federal government, get ready for the James Kingsley Show. Yay!
As I said, Jeff, if they're saying it's smart, flip it 180 degrees. Then you've got to move to the truth.
It's smart for them, but not for us, like, you know.
Exactly.
Is yeah, I mean, so you got smart technology, smartphones, smart television, smart meters. All this stuff is sending out all these, you know, pulse signals on different frequencies.
Maybe every time maybe what they're trying to tell us here is that the smart is what's being taken from us as we use these things. So whatever we use, that smart is being drained out of us.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, there goes some more smart, because they can take care of it. I don't have to push buttons anymore. That thing can do it for me now.
I mean, it goes right the way back to calculators, James. I mean, nowadays kids don't even have to use, you know, they can use calculators in school, so that, you know, it stops them using their grey matter.
I remember when I saw my rich brother gave my father his very first calculator back when calculators were new. Those ones, now you can buy them for $1 at the dollar store. Do you know how much it cost? $300 for what? It had like 8 keys on it or whatever, 9 keys.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. It was just like.
Yeah, Pippa, can I ask you a question? When you was actually doing all this, going through the parliaments, trying to get acts passed and that, what in particular, was there any one thing that actually went against what you wanted, that you was really disliked, but it was still passed? What was it?
Sorry, Paul, say again. Which one thing?
When you was going through the Data Protection Act on all this biometrics and RFIDs, was there one particular thing which you didn't want to go through that actually went through?
Well, I have to say that the legislation that went through in the Protection of Freedoms Act was very good, because it's basically schools have to ask consent from both parents, and if one parent doesn't consent, that overrides the consent of another parent, so the child doesn't have to give its fingerprints up.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, the child, if both parents consent and the child doesn't consent, then the child's non-consent overrides the parent's consent. So in respect of that particular bit of legislation, it's really good, because non-consent overrides consent. But however, what I would have really liked to have done is to alter the Data Protection Act so that anybody's biometrics, regardless of whether you're in the workplace or wherever, because I've had, you know, people get in touch with me, adults, saying I'm having to log into a fingerprint sort of registration in and out of work stuff. You know, I've been told if I don't do it, I'm going to get sacked. And I'm like, well, you know, I can't help you, because this only applies, the legislation only applies to under 18-year-olds. So I would have liked to have seen the Data Protection Act amended. And in actual fact, we've got something called the GDPR that's coming in May 2018, which is the General Data Protection Regulations Act, which is coming from the EU. Now, I'm not a massive fan of EU regulations, because a lot of them are very vacuous, but having said that, I've read through this particular GDPR EU regulation, and it's really good.
Oh, so this one's an actual plus then?
Well, it is, and if it can get in just before we leave, that would be great, because it has some really strict regulations on data control, especially with biometrics. So, I mean, I've not read it for a while, but when it came in about a year ago, there's a certain amount of sort of cooling down period. So schools and, you know, different companies.
I mean, what I don't understand is, with this Data Protection Act, what is the need for them to have okayed your sexual life? What the heck has your sexual life got to do with any of this?
Is this in the Data Protection Act?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a certain, the Schedule 2 under the Data Protection Act is personal sensitive information, and there's stuff like sexuality, religion, ethnicity, and all sorts of different things. I think there's about 7 or 8 points in there that comes under that. And if you don't want to disclose that sort of information to somebody, you don't have to. So again, I would like to have seen biometrics put under that.
Yeah.
So
I still don't understand what was the need for them to know anything about your sexual life. Your sexual life is what you do behind closed doors. Well, most people do behind closed doors in your own house, and that is your own business.
Well, absolutely. No, I agree with you. It's nobody's business at all in your own.
It's like the census, isn't it? Every 10 years you get a census come through the door, and with the census, every time it's more and more intrusive. They want to know the ins and outs of, if you pardon the expression.
My census won't go straight in the bin stuff.
Wasn't it Lockheed Martin that ran the last census in the UK?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. They got the contract to do that. I mean, and they've got all that data. I mean, it's like, for example, all the schools in England and Wales upload all their information at the end of every term, so 3 times a year, on all the educational data of their students, and it goes up to the Department of Education. The Department of Education then give all that data in its raw form to a company called RM Education, which is a big multinational company based in the UK, and they manipulate it into the form of something called the National Pupil Database. This is the largest, richest data set of pupils from the year of 2001, I think, I'm correct in saying that, up to present day. So, and then they give it back to the Department of Education, and the Department of Education do whatever they do with it. But what the Department of Education decided to do in 2012 was think, oh, we've got this massive educational data set. Let's open it up to whoever wants to look at it, basically. And so they opened up the National Pupil Database to whoever wanted to apply to look at the data. So if you wanted to look at medical data or social care data or anything that was of a sensitive nature, you would have to go to government data centres, which they have in the UK, and then you would go into a little room with a computer screen, a bag, and your telephone taken off you. You would go in there with a pen and paper, and you would just have to write down what you saw on the computer screen. Not so with the National Pupil Database. The Department of Education will email National Pupil Database data sets out to people unencrypted.
This is dangerous. Yet
I know. It's terrible.
Truly disgraceful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what they're doing.
There was a parent, when this happened in 2012, there was a parent that got in touch with me and said, this is outrageous. Is anybody on this? And I sort of said, well, I'm sort of on it a little bit, but if you want to do something, that's great. And bless her, this parent set up a website called Defend Digital Me, and she basically put a subject access request into her primary school where her kids were at. And so under the Data Protection Act, you can request any data from any company, body, public body that has information on you under the Data Protection Act, and they have to give you all the data they have on you. So she did that.
Sorry, Pippa, I'll carry on.
Yeah, so she did that to her primary school and said, can you tell me under the subject access request what information you're giving to the National Pupil Database? And the school wrote back to her and said, don't know anything about National Pupil Database. And she was like, what? So schools, I know, because it's all compartmentalized. So she wrote.
But I mean, if anybody was going to do a hit on you, the first thing that person would do, if they have a good hitman of any sort, they would find out all your habits and your information on you. Now, if it's at the click of a mouse, basically at your fingertips, well, the job's nearly done for the hitman.
Yeah.
I mean,
The next day she did. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say they've done the same with our health data as well. What used to be confidential between doctor and patient confidentiality is now gone out the window because we had to opt out. And if you didn't opt out, then it all gets basically open to marketing. Anybody in the advertising industry, it can all access it and send you spam through your door and anything like that,
Well, it's interesting because the guy that ran No to ID sort of 15 years ago, that was really helpful with us with the biometrics in schools thing.
Is that Phil Booth?
Yeah, Phil Booth. Yeah, he's now running Med Confidential.
Oh right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Phil and Terry Doughty, who ran Action on Rights to Children. They both do Med Confidential. So Med Confidential, if you type that into a search engine, you should get their website and you can sort of see what your rights are with regards to your health data. But going back to this parent's sort of experience, so she'd given the school a subject access request to see what information they were putting on the Department of Education's National Pupil Database, and they said, no, can't give you that because we didn't even know it existed, even though they upload information to it via the local authority. So she gave the Department of Education a subject access request and said, I want to see what's on, my pupils' records on the National Pupil Database. And the Department of Education said, we're not going to give you that information because under the Data Protection Act, I'm just going to tell you which of the data is, they have a clause under the Data Protection Act. If data is for research or historical or statistical purposes, they don't have to cop up that information. So he said, no, we're going to get out under clause, I think it's clause 11, section 33. I'll have to have a look up that. But so she couldn't get the information from the Department of Education or her school. So what she did was she wrote to RM Education, who processes the information for the Department of Education, and said, well, you've got all my kids' data. You give it to the Department of Education. I'm going to give you a subject access request. What do you have on my kids? And they coughed it up. So she had to go to the private corporation that was dealing with the information, and she couldn't get the information from the primary school or the Department of Education, which is really poor from a governmental point of view. But I mean, good that the Data Protection Act worked in the fact that she could go to the private company. But it's a bit of a poor do when a parent has to spend the best part of, a year going through this process, because each subject access request takes 40 working days. So you're talking 2 months before somebody's going to reply to you. So, and this is where kids' data is, the schools are logging so much stuff from children, and it's not accessible by parents. I was only talking to a person who's a third degree journalist student at a university, and he wanted to interview me because he wanted to check that his biometric data had been erased from the school that he was at prior to going to university. And he'd put a subject access request into the school and the company that sort of supplied the school with biometric data for the database. And neither the school or the company could say definitely that his biometric data had been erased. So he's now sort of getting in touch with me thinking, I mean, he's 21, 22. So, he would have been maybe 12, 13, 14 when he gave his fingerprint up. And so, and I'm getting like the next generation of kids coming through thinking, or savvy kids that are thinking, actually, what did I do? What did I give up? And how do I know where that's gone? And they don't know where it's gone.
You can't even keep track of that for real now. I mean, come on. It's like once you've given data, it goes to it's like the internet. It spreads out to different centers. And so even if they erase it at one center, that does not guarantee that it's gone from another center.
Yeah, but what gets me is even the parents' information is being gleaned from the children. And all that gets collated also.
The brown shirts live.
Yeah.
Unwittingly, unknowingly, we've got brown shirt thinking going on, which is if you can get to the youth, you get their parents. You can get information on them. I told you guys, 2 weeks ago about that pencil.
James, explain what brown shirts is for the younger viewers that may not be upon their history.
But when Hitler wanted to turn the nation, realize much of propaganda in the United States and now post-Tavistock Institute, post-Rand Corporation, which you can go study these things on your own. But going back to Hitler, taking it back to Hitler.
You're not breaking it. It's now Tavistock Portman. It's not just Tavistock. It's Tavistock Portman now.
Well, I'm just saying that was the beginning or basis of it. It came into Western culture and influenced Europe and the United States. But if you look at what happened was, we go back, you can look up Project Paperclip. These are all established. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are things you can actually go look up. Now, what was a brown shirt? A brown shirt was Hitler's youth squad. He basically told a whole bunch of kids, and realized it was all patriotism here, because that's how it always sells. Hey kids, you want to be a good German citizen? Yeah, Uncle Alf, whatever. It was it was one of these things where everybody was patriotic, just like we are here in America. We're taught to be patriotic, put on your red, white, and blue, march around with your flag. Same patriotism, same thing in Europe where you got your little, European crossy thing that you do and you wave your flag. We're taught that. That these Hitler youth were taught if you want to be a good German, you start as a young person. So they put them in these things that were like Cub Scouts, the brown shirts. They had brown shirts on. And they were then told to go around and find out information. If you gave information, you could earn merit badges in a sense by giving out information on anybody that went against the state, went against
even your own parents.
Oh, I mean, to do that was the highest honor. They would make sure you were placed in a better place because obviously your parents were poor at being good citizens, good Germans. So you have people who are afraid of it. I mean, that's what we see also in anything, like in North Korea right now. Same thing. You see all these people waving banners and going, "Oh, patriotism." They're not. Most of them really don't want to be there. Probably they'd rather be home, just kicking back. But they got to go out and wave at Granddaddy. Hey, we're wonderful out here because they don't want to die. They don't want people showing up at their house saying, "You're not a good citizen. You didn't do good. You're not patriotic."
Apparently, James, under the Third Reich, they used censuses to target certain ethnic groups as well. Yeah. So all that can be used against you in
everything.
In ways you couldn't possibly imagine now. But if you look like, say, a few years from now, we're in a really bad police state or something, any of that could be used against us. They could be using it for eugenicist reasons or against certain races.
Twisted to be used against you.
Yeah. Twisted to be used against you. Taking real things and twisting them so that the impact of them is such that you think such and such is going to occur because this happens. Like 9/11 brought more of this surveillance state upon us. Whether 9/11 was, I've always said, if 9/11 was an inside job, outside job, upside down job, it really doesn't matter. They used it for the benefit of what they were trying to do, which is better, clearer and more precise surveillance. And we all went, "Please bring us cameras. Please search us at the airports." We begged for that. Why?
Well, this is what they're trying to get the people of England to do over the Manchester bombing. They're trying to get the people of England to beg for all these new rules to be brought in for their benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the saying, the good book says, if you're willing to give up security for freedom,
you deserve neither.
You'll get neither and deserve nothing. So you end up losing both. So fight for your freedom at every stage. That's the way I look at it. I mean, you can always get security of one form or another at a later date or whatever. But once your freedom's gone, man. That's it.
Well, I have to ask, what is a rational level of being secure and what's an irrational level? It's like, okay, when I was a kid, I had a beautiful neighborhood. It was a secure neighborhood. I could ride my bike. I didn't have to wear anything special, padding, nothing. We were jumping big old hills and sometimes crashing and getting old, having a little road burn for a couple of days and maybe wondering if we maybe threw out today we see kids way overcompensated. We now are like so paranoid of like them getting hurt. We put them in so much like gear that how could they not get hurt? Now they can't hardly see a car with this like, military gear on. And I'm like, what happened to freedom?
Is there anything down the line you can see that's coming in which definitely got you worried?
Well, I see everything having to be padded and everything being soft and cushy for everyone, and that we're not allowed to say anything that might hurt anyone's feelings or do anything that might cause anyone to feel bad.
Mollycoddled by the nanny state and wrapped up in cotton wool.
Well, and I'm a love guy, okay? I'm all for love, but I want it to be free will love, meaning you willingly give love, not you're forced to by some government or some entity force that tells you, you must obey my command to love. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, Pippa, is there anything in the biometric line that maybe got you worried at the moment that's coming down the line?
It's interesting listening to what you're saying. I think there's a sort of going back to sort of data collection and everything. I think with the way that people think or maybe will think, there's a huge amount of information, data for profiling how people think, and this is what the Prevent strategy is about in the UK. And also, it's not so much, you know, about what the information the government's got. It's about the information the private companies have got, the academies, the companies running the academies here in the UK, like BA Systems and AME.
I have to ask something though. When we take into account the military-industrial complex, are we really talking about? I mean, that's our countries. Yeah, so in essence, you're really talking about our companies engaged in the military-industrial complex, and that's what Europe and America has always been wound up in. That's what we make our money on.
Yeah, and so the UK as well. America and the UK are the big.
That's what I'm saying. We work together on that Western culture. We are Western culture.
Yeah. Is it good for them to have that info? I mean, maybe it is good for them to have that information. Maybe it's good for security. I don't know. Or I mean, the next generation's data, they are the most data harvested generation. We have no idea. I mean, unless you sort of dig deep into sort of YouTube videos of the ed tech companies on, you know, what they say they can do and what they can do actually, is unbelievable. I mean, Jen, this mum that runs the Defend Digital Me website, was saying that she went to an expo in Germany, and one of the companies there said, "Oh, we record the pupils all the time, and if there's a word they type in that sort of comes on the Prevent strategy, then we can film them 50. You know, we have the 15 seconds of footage before that, and I bet the schools and the kids don't even know they're being filmed by these big."
Yeah.
No,
So I'm not, you know, sort of where it's going is, you know, if you have that information about a certain individual, you are able to profile them. And when you're talking about children sort of going into schools at sort of 2 or 3 years old and having learning goals and not hitting them particularly, or hitting them and achieving or not achieving, and you can log what they eat, you can log, you know, their height and weight, and all this sort of aggregated data that goes with education. You have a really great, I mean, that's a fantastic opportunity to look at how society is going to go in the next sort of generation, and it's not so much the government, so I say it's the sort of corporations do it. So can you, yeah, maybe they can sort of pre-think what you might do, or predetermine what you might do as an activist or non-activist, or whether you're going to be compliant or non-compliant. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And this is the thing. We're just at the cusp of this tsunami of data collection, and we don't know where it's going to go.
Well, my gut feeling is, with all the data mining and with AI and transhumanism, we're going to be in the hive mind Borg situation much quicker than we actually think.
Yeah, we're going to have that pre-crime and thought crime stuff. It'll be like a science fiction movie where the artificial intelligence will be able to work out exactly what they reckon your threats will be to society in the future before you've even thought about it.
That's happening, but Paul, that's happening now. I mean, schools will give social services data, and social services will flag up families that have no reason. They've no reason to be flagged up other than the fact that they might have a child at risk.
Yeah, or a child at school has said something which is factually wrong and been taken up by the teachers and passed up through the chain.
Yeah.
What was the name of that film that they did about pre-crime with Tom Cruise or something? I can't remember.
Minority Report.
That's the one, Minority Report.
Watch it. That was like 15, 20 years ago. It's very accurate.
I'm waiting for the day when instead of ads that come on Facebook and say, "Hey, would you like a Jimmy John's sandwich?" It'll say, "Go to Jimmy John's now. Buy sandwich." Like, it knows so much that I wanted a sandwich. It'll say, "Go to Jimmy John's, get sandwich now."
Go to McDonald's now.
Do you notice I said Jimmy John's because for some reason that's one of the few things I actually order through the internet when I order sandwiches. So I get 99% of my ads on frickin' Facebook are Jimmy John's. How do they know that?
Or sorry, you're suffering with too much cholesterol. Your piece is going to cost you an extra $40.
But this is it. I mean, if you're monitoring a child from the age of 2 to 19, and you can see maybe what it has for breakfast, because they have breakfast clubs at schools, what it has for dinner, then you can sort of think at the age of 19, okay, so the health insurance on that child might be a little bit more expensive than one another because they've eaten too many chips. Who knows? Who knows what sort of, what you just eat at school.
Burgers, we've studied your eating habits over the last 20 years, and we have decided you are now at a risk of a cardiovascular failure. So we are increasing your insurance premiums by 150%.
Absolutely. But the AXA got wrapped on the fingers, I think, by the Information Commissioner's Office, who oversees Data Protection Act, because they were going on social media and looking at the profiles of the young people, the young lads that have been applying for driving licenses to see if they were sort of going out on the piss and doing, getting drunk and doing whatever they were doing, and thinking, okay, well, they're a bit prone to sort of going out, so we'll stick their insurance up. And then they got told they couldn't do that. But that's where it's going to go.
That might not be the best time to be like, promoting that you smoke pot. That probably wouldn't be a good time, I wouldn't think.
Yeah.
Because if the insurance company saw that, surely you'd be dead.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, obviously my children are now 20 and 18, 19, and they're sort of going through into university. And they are on social media, but because of what I've done and I suppose, sort of being data aware, their Facebook profiles are completely boring. And I love that. I love that because they know that if there is potential, if they're tagging anything or if they put anything on there, they can get data mined. There's no.
Well, I have one kid. I get where you're coming from, Pippa, because I have one kid who's my youngest daughter. She's in her 20s now, and she gets on the internet and she just lays everything about how she's feeling, the family, her personal life. She'll write this ongoing one continuous paragraph of everything she's thinking, feeling, and I've told her how many times, look, it's good to share how you feel. It's good to share what you think, but probably not best to put your life's diary right there on Facebook, and because people will use that information against you. They're not going to use it to help you.
Exactly.
And there has been instances of employees or potential employees sort of saying to people at interview, we want your Facebook, profile, and so we can have a look at you. I don't know how that would go in the UK, but certainly that's I think.
Here in the US, I don't think they even have to ask anymore, and most of them, it's like they can just run it because most employers now here in the US will do a search on a prospective employee on Google. And, there are things on Google that when I look at them, I go, this was a time when I believed something different or whatever,
Well, I'm buggered then, aren't I?
But it's all for your security. We got to keep protecting silly people.
Exactly. That's crazy, dude. It's all crazy. It's the whole. When you really look at the internet itself, it's sort of a death trap of information. You everything you put in there is going to be visible and seen. And I often go back in my own life and I look at the things I've done and I go, do I want this out there? I've never hid anything about myself on the internet. I've been on the internet for years. I've never really hid it.
Same here. I will put about my cats and I put about my flutes, and then I will put about the current affairs, and that is basically it. Nothing real deep, because I know people will use that against you.
Yeah.
I tell you what, it bothers me a little bit, and this is on a personal level and sort of stepping away from biometrics and data collection in schools, is that I have some friends' daughters that are pregnant that are putting sort of pre-birth scans of their babies on the internet, and that might be absolutely great to share with family. But I'm thinking, this kid hasn't even been born yet, and there's a photograph of it on the internet. And I don't know
that's how people share with family now.
I would feel if my parents had done that, sort of 40 years ago.
But this is the photo sharing method now. Some people don't have like hard copy pictures anymore. It's all done through this internet or sharing of electronic data. And so, it's always available, and somewhere in transit, I can tell you for a fact, okay, and again, this is from a personal case I can't go into, that the government can interfere with and see what you've got going through your phone almost every moment. So if they want to go back, and NSA has all that available. If they want to point out, they pull that out, every dot and tittle, every change of a letter, everything right there, every picture you've taken, whether you erased it or not, right there.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, James, at all. But I'll tell you what, I have become a technophobe over the years for these sort of reasons. For example, what you're talking about, those pictures. I mean, they're digital. Anything digital can be photoshopped, whereas the old technology with analog, I mean, at one stage they would only allow analog photos in the court to be submitted for evidence because analog can't be photoshopped so easily. It's not, you know, it's not something that can be adjusted and messed about with. So sometimes the old technology is the best, I reckon, personally.
The simpler the better. That's why I'm Moolinex, because Moolinex makes things simple, and that includes
Oh, a good little plug for Moolinex there, Paul. Sales by 25%.
Dude, can we get some commercial advertising in here? Because I think I did a Jimmy John's ad earlier too. So
where's the revenue? Where's the revenue?
Where's the people who are putting in the? We need here on. If people come here to the, do we have super chat on here? We should do that, and then PJ should get some money for this so that we can run this business and make this thing work. We have never done that. We don't do the I mean, I've seen a lot of. I watch webcasts. Okay, I enjoy watching like what we do. So it's interesting to me to see people doing all this webcasting stuff. It'd be great if we had all this. Paul's got shares in the company.
I'll be back in a minute, folks. I'm going to make a nice cup of tea using Tesco's premium quality tea bag.
Well, that's great. I'm so glad because I'm going to sit here and smoke my Phillips brand cigarettes.
Pippa, your information's been absolutely gem. Is there anything pertinent you think you need to add to what you've already said?
Not particularly, other than the fact that people, you have a choice. Everybody has a choice. You know, don't go with the flow. If you don't want to do something, don't do it. Certainly in schools, kids have equal rights to every other child that's using a biometric system. So schools have an obligation to make sure that children who aren't using a biometric system certainly have absolute access to everything else that children that are using a biometric system have. So, I mean, apart from that, my websites, I've got pippaking.blogspot.com, against RFID in schools.com, and then there's uksmartcities.org. So I sort of touch on smart city agenda with the use of facial detection and soft biometrics, which we spoke about earlier, Paul, running behind CCTV systems. And there's another website called stateofsurveillance.blogspot.com, which I write on about the police use of facial recognition technology, which we've not really touched upon tonight, but there's some articles in there that I've written.
For the people that didn't have a pen at hand, can you give both those sites in a couple of minutes so they can get a pen and get it written down? Sorry,
say again, Paul.
Can you give us both those sites in a couple of minutes so people can get a pen and get it wrote down?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
I'll just add them onto description at end once it's finished. I'll get them off the Pippa.
Oh, thank you, PJ.
Yeah. Fine, but thank you for having me on. It's been really interesting to talk. It's been good.
Well, it's been great having you on the show. I guess are we getting ready to end this one, guys?
Yeah, well, we've been well blessed, Pippa, to have you.
Oh, we have. Pippa, you've been an excellent guest. I would like to probably have you on again. I had to step away for a second there.
Oh, most definitely.
You're a person who seems well informed, and you definitely know how to talk about your subjects. And I'm sure there's so much more we could have talked about today on just this issue alone. So I want to thank you so much for being here and being a part of this.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been great.
Well, guys, I guess that